Okay, I think we'll get started, everyone. It's 12 o'clock. Just wanted to say welcome. Thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Brett McIntyre. My Haida name is Hutiki. I'm an associate with Nick Bray Architecture. We're an architecture studio based in Victoria and Vancouver on the beautiful and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Songhees, and Esquimalt nations. We are hosting these information sessions to help fill a gap for architects and industry professionals and to share learning about relevant topics that we are exploring in our office. We have roughly 600 people, 650 people registered for today's talk. So thank you everyone for your interest as well. Next slide, please. So just a few items to run through before we get into the talks. Our next seminar is going to be on January 27th. It's with Ari Uthoff of Kolesnikov Mass Timber. They'll be talking about designing with mass timber, focusing on innovation, performance, and workflow. Please follow us on Eventbrite and LinkedIn for more information on upcoming sessions. If anyone has any suggestions for future webinars or you're interested in being a guest speaker, please feel free to reach out to us or to use the chat box in this meeting just to touch base. Just a heads up, we're also lining up more seminars for the new year. We're looking at doing some with Celerity Engineering on ULC listings, as well as Martin Knowles of MK Media on promoting your work in media. So please stay tuned. Next slide. So yeah, just a few housekeeping items really quickly. Thanks everyone for participating in the poll that we've got on the screen right now. During the talk, please use the chat box for any questions you might have. We'll try to answer as many as possible at the end. We're hoping to have a lively discussion on this one, so please, if you have any questions, don't be shy. A reminder, we'll be putting a link to the AIBC accreditation form halfway through the presentation and again at the end. So please have your AIBC number ready. You're going to have to report for yourself. We aren't reporting for everyone, so the link for you to do so will be provided though. And finally, full recordings of all of our seminars are available on our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com and search Nick Bray Architecture, and it'll take you right there. So today we wanted to focus on the practical considerations of working with First Nations communities. In our experience, there's been plenty of discussion on why working with First Nations communities is important. I mean, at this point, that's something that we take as sort of self-evidence. However, it seems that there's been less discussion on how specifically this work can be facilitated. So it's our hope that this webinar can establish some base principles that can be used as a starting point to building strong community relationships that will help your design team ensure that your projects are executed in a good way with sincere and effective consultation and participation, as well as fair and transparent procurement. Obviously, this is a massive topic, so 1 hour really isn't enough to kind of cover it in any level of detail, but we just want to sort of plant the seed and establish a starting point so that you can move forward in a good way. With that, we'd like to get started. We'd like to introduce Cory Douglas. Cory is an artist, cultural advisor, and educator. Through his parents, he's connected to the Tsimshian, Haida, and Squamish nations. He's passionate about merging his ancestral roots in artistry and with his education and experience in architecture and design to respectfully communicate the concepts of modern formline to a broader audience. So, Cory, please take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brett. As you had mentioned, this is a very complex topic. We, co-founder Shanti Williamson and I have been developing our business plan and strategy for about 6 years now. As Brett had mentioned, I'm a Squamish Nation member with Haida and Tsimshian ancestry. The business model itself was kind of rooted with understanding the cultural complexities of our art form that is primarily recognized here on the West Coast. As mentioned, my business name is Modern Formline Design. Formline Design is an architectural, or sorry, is a name associated with our Northwest Coast family's art form. As mentioned, I am a Squamish Nation member. Squamish Nation is one of many Indigenous communities that are recognized as Coast Salish. So our consideration around the business model was having a better understanding of the art form itself, both Formline design and Coast Salish. What are the differences? Which kind of open up the door for further discussions and considerations around what are the cultural differences between our Northwest Coast families and our Coast Salish communities. So we started to explore a little bit more about the architectural differences between our Northwest Coast families and our Coast Salish communities. And this is all kind of covered in our workshop. It's a 2-hour workshop that we are going to be kind of looking through a little bit highlighted moments in the workshop itself. This is a 2-hour workshop that we offer. It is a learning credit with AIBC as well. And as we've started to uncover the cultural differences between our Northwest Coast families and our Coast Salish communities, we started to get a better understanding of how complex this topic really is. Land acknowledgement, is a primary resource for us to kind of better understand who we are engaging with. To what communities are we meant to kind of recognize as part of any identifiable element that could be incorporated into design, which kind of helped us, really better understand purpose of culture being referenced in our discipline. How is it incorporated? Where is it expressed? Who are we engaging with? And how is a space created for collaboration? We typically fall back on artistry as being part of a potential collaboration. First Nations art has always been a primary resource as far as like culturally expressive ideas. We're trying to bridge the gap between artist and designer. And what does designer look like as a collaborator? And how does collaboration work through projects? How do we ensure that we're providing an appropriate space that is safe for culture to play a role in the various disciplines on a project? So this isn't necessarily falling back on just architecture itself. It's all disciplines. So how can culture inform landscape design, planning, spatial planning, various forms of kind of expression in building materials? And how do we ensure that we're going through an internal review process as you're working through the drawings and concepts themselves? Cultural appropriation, is another, as part of that understanding. So how do we ensure that we're working with the right people from the right community? And I think the land acknowledgement plays a significant role in understanding what is culturally appropriate and what isn't. We played a little bit of an exercise on our projects. They are typically from the private sector, but we've also engaged in the public sector as well. So this kind of outlines a strategy on how to work with existing policies, maybe agreements between nations, agreements between local government and the Indigenous communities. So there's a variable understanding of being able to clarify between how we're working through this process of engaging with Indigenous communities. And a lot of this is built on trust. How do we ensure that we're working through this process where the people that we're engaging with feel confident, feel comfortable, feel engaged, feel like they are actually a part of this process? So breaking down these barriers ensuring that we're going through this process respectfully. I've had a chance to sit down and talk with Robert Davidson a few times. Now, the reason why I bring up this person is because he has pushed the envelope of our cultural monetary worth. The industry that we work in is benefiting from all forms of cultural integration, consideration, collaboration, and businesses are built off of anything that is really kind of bringing forward culture into their projects. So how do we establish a cultural monetary worth system for Indigenous engagement? What are the professions? How do we ensure that the people that we're working with understand the value of their participation and the information they're going to be sharing with our team? So much like Robert Davidson kind of pushing the envelope within the public arts industry, we're trying to do the same with all of our projects. Again, trying to bridge the gap between artistry to designer, and the design team engaging with the artists to come up with new levels of technology with respect to culture. How do we build out narratives? How do we ensure that the value system is present in all of the building kind of information that we're outlining as far as design? We're seeing a large number of projects now where they are managed by Indigenous communities or by the private sector. So, we're here in Vancouver. We're seeing a significant push from local Indigenous communities, being Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, where they are financially supporting or in partnership with the private landowners, developers here in the city, in collaboration for projects very similar to Sanok. Sanok is a very prominent project here in the city that is establishing some new benchmarks as far as culture being expressed in a variety of opportunities throughout the project itself. Being a Squamish Nation member, we were very fortunate to be a part of that process now. We are engaged with the design team, bringing some cultural references from a Coast Salish perspective into the landscape design itself. These are very prominent projects here in the city of Vancouver, where we're building out a model of Indigenous engagement strategies, plans, cultural expressive designs. How are they integrated into the overall concept and design of a building, into the landscape architecture, interior design? How is it embedded within the building materials itself? And how are we working through the process of establishing agreements with some of the artists that they're collaborating with? So a new market value is being established on a project by project basis here in the city of Vancouver. And I believe it's actually something that's being recognized by the greater Indigenous community itself. We have a large number of Indigenous communities here on the West Coast, the most densely populated Indigenous communities here on the West Coast. We have over 200 here on the West Coast. So, as we're starting to build out this model of Indigenous engagement, we're sharing this information with our families up and down the coast here. As mentioned, Sanok is doing some tremendous work creating a benchmark. When I first started my career as a cultural consultant, I was trying to better understand what role culture plays in the variety of disciplines on a project. And again, this is a really healthy project initiative where we can constructively look at what is being done successfully and what hasn't been done as of yet. So having these honest conversations with the leadership on these projects, we are contracted to work with on this project right now within Chikai, and having, again, really constructive conversations with the team on how to better approach collaboration. Uh, where does funding apply to any form of engagement? Within our Indigenous communities, we have a wealth of knowledge, anything from weaving to carving, language, performance. These are all very strong disciplines with respect to our cultural expression and our identity that could inform a project. So how do we highlight this in projects like Sanaa? It comes through creativity, something that we pride ourselves on in this industry. A real strong creative process, a very strong engaging process. This is a great, again, benchmark for us to constructively look at. We've been working through our own engagement process in the private sector. We've been very fortunate to have independent landowners like PCI or Low Tide or Cadillac Fairview to invest in our team. As it stands right now, this isn't necessarily a policy within the city of Vancouver. So there's no hard legislation for these independent landowners to engage with Indigenous professionals like ourselves. So as I had mentioned, we've been building out this model of how Indigenous engagement and professionals like myself can highlight how important Indigenous knowledge plays in the overall concept, plan, strategy, procurement for independent small businesses like myself to be working on projects like the one that you see on the screen right now. So this is with Vancouver Community College. I'm one of two cultural consultants that are working on the campus plan. We worked with the staff, we worked with the architects on establishing some really strong culturally rooted history of place to this particular site. That's something that we also want to highlight. Every potential site has history with respect to pre-colonial contact. So how do we ensure that that knowledge is being best represented and supported in the overall project itself? So we strategically ensured that we brought knowledge keepers to the design team, to our client and staff, and provided them with a great wealth of knowledge, which we've referred to as knowledge keeper workshop sessions. And we've exercised it here and with other clients that we're currently working with now. So this particular site had a historical foreshore that we wanted to recognize. This is the new automotive building for Vancouver Community College. We, as our Indigenous people, have our own means of transportation, being the canoe. And because this is a historical site for our Indigenous communities, being Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, we wanted to acknowledge that traditional foreshore and the canoe itself. So this is a very contemporary approach to acknowledging that history of place. This is a very profound project for us that we won awards for. We're pretty excited about having unearthed this, no pun intended, these cultural references into this project itself. And we're currently in the process now of working on the rest of the campus plan. This was a very prominent client of ours, an amazing project that highlighted a much deeper rooted cultural engagement strategy that attracted other clients along Great Northern Way. We were invited to a design charrette, and in the design charrette, we shared the same value system, this engagement strategy, that allowed us to attract other like-minded landowners along Great Northern Way. This is when we met Tim with PCI. We met Low Tide as well, and a number of other landowners here, and established this term of reference, the cultural ribbon, in this two-day workshop and design charrette. We started to unearth what that kind of meant to the project, the overall concept, and plan for the future of Great Northern Way. We had city staff involved in the charrette. It became an adopted term of reference for the Broadway plan. So, all of these engagement sessions allowed us to better understand where culture can play a role. It's not just in the architectural expression, it's not just interior design, it's in planning, it's policy. These are very rooted spaces that inform how our projects are developed. So, being able to establish these relationships with local government really kind of helped us better understand the role that we play as cultural consultants in these projects. So, as we're again sort of working through these ideas and these concepts, we started to get a better understanding of what are the cost implications? How do we work through this process to understand what the potential cost implications are for any forms of Indigenous engagement, cultural expression? How do you build out a pro forma? We've been working really hard on making sure that um, that that we're working through this process very rooted, and it's a really exciting time. We're pretty excited about engaging through this process, and I just want to thank everyone for being here. And I'll pass the mic back over to Brett. Thank you, Brett.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Cory. That was great. Um, yeah, so just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, please don't be shy about throwing those into the chat. And just a reminder that we will be putting up a link to the AIBC self-reporting form so that you can report your hours directly from here. And a reminder again, we are not reporting for you. You'll have to report for yourself. Okay, so moving along, we have our next presenter coming up. That is Erik Hunter. So we'd like to introduce Erik. Erik is the owner-director of Sioux Projects. Erik's maternal heritage is of the Stoney Nakoda Nation on his mother's side, while his paternal heritage is Sri Lankan. He founded Sioux Projects while completing his Red Seal Carpenter's training, and he is a member of the Home Builders Association of Vancouver and the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses, as well as a current member of the Urban Indigenous Advisory Committee with the City of Vancouver. Erik's passionate about building and about working with Indigenous communities. He's speaking with us today about our Indigenous participation plans and their importance in building projects. So, Erik, please take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Brett. I'm a lieutenant, everyone. My name is Erik. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to present here today. I'm really excited to share with you a bit about how Sioux Projects approaches Indigenous participation plans. We're a pretty small business for reference. I started Sioux Projects 3 years ago, and we've been growing really quickly. And I want to add to that point that I think we are very successful in it because of our Indigenous participation plans. And the clients that we target are generally First Nations and Indigenous organizations, and they always appreciate this approach. Um, so I hope that in this presentation, I can inspire in all of you the chance to go out there and look more for how you can procure Indigenous participation into your business model, not only when it's like kind of tokenized, but also when it's very relevant to just not make the construction industry such a especially when it comes to contracting, a bit of a boys' club, and we're not really playing too much with other groups of people we don't know very well. So By all means, we do that as well. We're not only procuring Indigenous. That's kind of impossible, but um, with that, we'll get started into this. Just share my slideshow. So, again, the Sioux Projects was founded 3 years ago. I'm a member of the Goodstoney First Nation, which is adjacent to Calgary, just between Cochrane and Banff. Beautiful views of the Rockies out there. But my grandmother had come to Vancouver, immigrated to Vancouver 40 some years ago, just to escape kind of the social atmosphere and environment going on reserve. Um, Unfortunately, at a young age, my mother lost her, and then we lost our mother also at a young age. So we were adopted, and I was fortunate to go into an Indigenous family here in Vancouver that they owned some homes. I became a red seal carpenter, and it inspired me to become a builder through renovating my parents' homes. Um, so on to our next slide. We have, I think the kind of the most blatant thing that um, comes to mind in the corporate sector of Canada for Indigenous procurement these days is the TRC call to action number 92, which is called business and reconciliation. So, like I said, the construction industry being such kind of a boys' club, and us not really um, having the opportunity to pull in people, you play with people you trust, and that's it, and that's fine. I get it, but it doesn't allow for young small businesses that are really wanting to grow and to go and work with some big players. Like we had an opportunity because the city of Vancouver has a procurement plan in place for Indigenous vendors to work with Graham Infrastructure. It was an awesome opportunity. It was about $150,000 job, but it was only because of this. And now that we're on their vendor list, we haven't for the last year no nudge about any other work. It's kind of, but I get it. It's um, but I hope that we can be a part of that change and we can see some differences over the next 10 or 20 years. Um, So, what are Indigenous participation plans? In the case of Graham, it was just like finding us on Google and giving us a call and asking us if we could do the work. For us, it's a bit more integrated into our business that more than half of our vendors that we really rely on a regular basis are Indigenous owned businesses. And it's a bit easier because they're small businesses and we're a small business. But if we were taking on a $10 million project tomorrow, I would have a really hard time relying on this two-person business. So when we look at larger projects, we're kind of more trying to, how do we get this painter to collaborate with this other painting company? How can maybe they manage them or make things work and make these ends meet. We want to build up these companies, but we also don't want to do so at the detriment of our own practice because they don't have the capacity yet. So we're kind of try to bridge this gap for our other small businesses. Um, so what is an Indigenous participation plan? I'll give you some examples of kind of we were successful in a couple of projects recently. One not yet, but one of them, our largest job to date was with the Vancouver Aboriginal Transformative Justice Services Society, a $400,000 job at the end with all our change orders, but initially 350,000. So between us and three subcontractors out of eight or nine, um, we we brought 70% of the project value went to Indigenous owned businesses. So an example here is on the right side for this client, where we listed out in our proposal all of our sub trades, and then I've highlighted here for you guys three local contractors that are Indigenous owned. Reader Glazing, owned by a little sole proprietor, owner of or member of the Okanagan Indian Band, was awesome for this, very cost effective, and the quality was on point. Same with Frog Clan Painting. Now, these two are both owner operated and like small businesses. While Woodshop was a little different, they are a co-op based. They're in East Van, and but they're operated by an Indigenous employee. It's kind of a co-ownership, um, and those are totally welcome as well. Like we can't expect that we're gonna find all just Indigenous owned. Um, and I would argue to say that it's cheap in some ways to see that an Indigenous owner is using a bunch of like non-Indigenous employees, and it's still kind of tokenism in a sense. Not to not to take a stab at some people out there, but put some effort into building up our communities. That's kind of what this is about, and what I'm passionate about. Um, on the left here was a recent proposal we gave to a larger construction management firm for First Nation up in Powell River. We kind of talked a bit about how we would be bridging a labor gap for one of our subs to bring a painter to the table. Um, and we kind of that's what we want to do. Like we have an opportunity to, as a general, give priority to Indigenous vendors. Some generals, they're only presenting one sub. They're not bringing out, like, well, here's three different subs and here's their bids and this is the guy we like. No, they're just bringing out one guy. So we have this opportunity too. And if our clients want a different bid in there, we'll do it. But most of the time, they're really wanting to be supporting just the subs we bring to the table, and those are the clients we like too. So. Um, Up next, what are some benefits to you guys as mutually, what, to the client and to the consultant? I think for us, we're finding kind of uh, new markets as we put in there. 90 to 95% of our clients are First Nations or Indigenous related organizations. When I started my business, we kind of were only residential and keeping small to Vancouver, handyman jobs. First year was about 150 grand. Second year was about 600 grand with, I think we got the tail end of that Graham job in there. Um, this recent year was probably 75% Indigenous related projects, um, up in the Caribou, locally a tenant improvement, 1.4 million in project sales. Next year, we're eyeing up 10 to 20 million dollars in project sales. So these clients, they have, especially when it comes to First Nations, one client, one band and council, they have far more than one homeowner might have at their at their ready, and so this is an awesome market to be in, and if you're playing fair and bringing in value like an Indigenous participation plan, they're going to appreciate that. Even a plan to work with their membership, um, consulting with youth and elders on um, architectural design. I mean, that's awesome, and that's where you're going to gain innovation and new perspectives, and also gain a reputation and an empowered brand image. So I strongly recommend incorporating this as a standard in general. I want to say just in general, like people, your subs will appreciate this for sure. Um, like I said, it can take many forms. I have a twin that wants to be an architect, so we're looking at a job and we're suggesting to the architect, because it's for my nation, to involve him in a mentorship. Um, this is a value add. Absolutely. Building up the nation's community members so that even one day that they could become almost um, they could take on these projects or small projects on their own, would be awesome. An employment opportunity similarly, if for someone more skilled. Collaboration with Indigenous suppliers like Sioux Projects would be an example. But there's many others out there. And then I would say just try to avoid tokenism. We've all ran into it, Cory and Brett. Anyways, like we've been in these situations where, here's our token Indian guy, and this is um, this is why this is this is basically solely why we're the guys to work with you. Um, and it can take many forms. I think the one of the most peculiar ones out there or you'll see firms hiring consultants and they'll give them some fee and it's just this, one person adjacent, almost completely separate of any of the business operations that helps them make a sale. So I would try to avoid that whenever possible. I'd have to say there is a couple situations or scenarios where I feel I take on more of a tokenism role, and I'll accept it more for I want to be growing my business, and that's more important to me than how I feel in a certain situation sometimes. But I'd probably decline these roles when we're more developed, and yeah, that's about it. So I would open the discussion to any questions you guys may have. Here are um, Cory and I's contact information, my email, my phone number, my cell. Actually, don't spam me, please. But feel free to shoot me a text or give me a call, and I'm happy to discuss how you can integrate an Indigenous participation plan in your business.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much, Eric. It was fantastic. Thank you both for your talks. That was very illuminating. I really think there's a lot of important information in there. Um, so we thought we'd move into questions now. Um, just a reminder again, if you have any questions, please just throw them in the chat, and we'll work through as many as we can. And again, a reminder, Cory, I believe you run not only workshops, but you offer consulting for projects as well. Is that correct?
Yes, Brett. Um, a broad range of projects Shaunti and I are on. Everything from like public art initiatives to campus plans. We're working with like BC Housing on a number of projects, some local architects here in the city. So yeah, it's a to Eric's point, it's a really exciting time to have established ourselves in this market.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so while we wait for maybe some to come in, I have a few questions that I was hoping to kind of to run through. I'm gonna take advantage of this. Um, so one thing I think that comes up as a challenge whenever a non-Indigenous design team is approached to work on an Indigenous project is so much of those that getting a meaningful consultation or meaningful engagement to happen is obviously you need to kind of understand the culture itself. And unfortunately, that sets up this sort of extractive relationship where your first act as a designer is to come into a community and, in a certain sense, take knowledge from that community. It's necessary, obviously, in order to understand and really begin design to have that. But how do you navigate, or how do you kind of avoid establishing this extraction right away? Or is there any way to kind of balance, what you're getting with maybe something that you're giving?
Um, I think to Eric's point, he mentioned is yeah, just kind of concerning ourselves with the budgetary constraints. And we will always fall back on, kind of accepting, to Eric's point as well, is kind of accepting the offers to be participating in a project through the public arts lens. Every project is going has a potential initiative around kind of culturally expressive ideas through public arts. So totem poles or welcome figures are very common for projects as far as cultural visibility. So we try and broaden the thought process to be more inclusive, and maybe kind of establish, a better understanding of intention, and maybe revisiting the budget. So every project has somewhere along the lines someone establishing a pro forma. So we've been chasing the numbers very confidently. We are working now with a local GC here in Vancouver, Etro, and we're exercising an appropriate process to outlining a more appropriate budget for projects through any forms of Indigenous engagement, participation, and procurement. You know, Eric mentioned that every Indigenous community has their own needs as far as like funding resources. So what does that look like from a project deliverable system? So um, a lot of really interesting challenges, but a lot of great opportunities for uh, exercising creativity.
Awesome. Great. Got a
Totally.
question.
I'll add to that too.
Please.
Um, like I think just to reiterate your question here, just how we can as a third party kind of bring value and kind of reciprocate what's going on here in this um, transaction. Is that right?
Yeah, basically. I mean, there's a long history of things being taken from First Nations communities, I think. So obviously, it's challenging when the first thing you do as a designer when you come into a community is take knowledge. So how do you kind of, like you said, how do you reciprocate?
Totally. Actually, I had an example of an architect putting in a proposal yesterday for one of our clients, and one of the things they put in as a value add was one that was some really minor landscape architecture, where they will consult with the community and bring in Indigenous plans into the project. And I think that the key point there was the consulting aspect of working with youth and elders, and more specifically elders in this case, to reintegrate Indigenous plants back into the landscape of the project. And other like this is more in a architect kind of design space here, but for us, it's we are still considered an outsider. We talked a bit about this, Brett and Cory. It's like I'll go to a community in the North Island and I'm Indigenous, sure, and that might feel like a leg up and shouldn't say a leg up, but like they can relate. They can relate to me and my experience and vice versa. And that's kind of what they appreciate about working with us. And we make a point of going out to them and not like we're it's not inconvenient. You're not inconvenient to work with. We want to work with you and we're excited to work with you. But a lot of these remote communities, they love the idea of wanting to create their own construction company. And I'm like, well, Eric, we would love to, we want to work with you. One day we're gonna replace you. And awesome, but um, what I'd say in this situation is I with these clients that say that, and my um, counter would just be we think that there's an opportunity and partnership to work together, and where we can employ members of the nation and build them up, and maybe over time, over the time of these guys putting in their 10,000 hours, they're going to be there, but it takes time to develop good carpenters, and anyways. The value being that we offer employment opportunities here, and that's the reciprocation of the relationship. Yeah, and apprenticeship opportunities, training opportunities, etc.
Awesome. Thank you. Got a question here. Believe this is probably for Cory, but definitely Eric. Feel free to chime in as well. Can you share a bit about your process for current public art initiatives in the city? Specifically, how do you connect Indigenous artists with non-Indigenous fabricators or architects, and how is that relationship managed?
This is again trying to establish a new market value. Cultural identity uh, has played a significant role in establishing cultural visibility, and the public arts community has been marginalized for much longer than I've been an artist. Um, so I'm going to try and answer this with a little bit of a timeline. So we're as Robert Davidson was doing, is establishing new market value of our culture. So pushing the envelope of a totem pole, for example, and the per linear foot that is clearly outlined for said element. So as you're starting to break down pricing, it's now informing potential collaboration. The Indigenous arts community is quite big here, um, and that's urban Indig, and that's local MST, being Coast Salish. So what we're trying to do is better understand not only the value system from an Indigenous perspective, more specifically Coast Salish, and understanding the role and responsibility of said land acknowledgement. What is the purpose of it? Why are we ensuring that we're recognizing Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh? Are we going to be establishing that as a value system within our arts commitments, our collaboration initiatives, our procurement strategy? So again, this is unearthing a lot of really deep questions as far as uh, where and how do you engage with Indigenous artists? uh, what is the budget? And I want to come back to that as a very crucial understanding of what a project can deliver as a potential procurement initiative, and maybe trying to understand and appreciate what um, what services that the artist could provide the project with. So, like the public arts is a form of social jewelry that we have come to understand and realize is integral, but it's not maximizing initiatives. So, how can our artists become designers, and how can these designers collaborate with the design team? So there's a long list of considerations that we need to review and evaluate from a project deliverable system. The delivery system is very well established. We have timelines, we have schedules, we have budgets. So again, we want to really unearth all of this and have a really more in-depth conversation around the artistry itself. So we want to create a safe place. And we've been doing that very well for the last 6 years as Modern Formline Design.
Nice. Thank you. Um, I think somewhat related to that, there's another question. How would you suggest starting developing public slash community engagement art initiatives? So where do you start, basically?
Budget.
Yeah.
It's where I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but we are constantly having to evaluate where we can best express culture. Our job is kind of I don't know, a manager of sorts. We want to find procurement initiatives within the project itself.
Mhm.
Modern Formline Design, we offer arts to the industry. Eric mentioned local Indigenous organizations like Luma and Terra Housing. We're working with them as well, bringing art. But I want to point back at budget. We need to work with everyone in this industry to better help everyone better understand what the commitments actually look like. Projects don't change. It always comes back to budget. So we want to be a part of those conversations, just like Eric had mentioned. We want to be in those rooms having these conversations at an intellectual level.
Nice. I
Best to start those conversations sooner in the project than later.
100%.
You started halfway through the project and the budgets blew through any potential of having that integrated. I would add us as a GC, but also I think architects have this opportunity too. Um, like we will try, or we're starting to roll this into our model, our sales model, is kind of a donation and working with us. We will donate towards an art piece on the project, if you work with us on a project. So, and I also have a couple architects I work with that'll provide like an in-kind contribution. So it upfront comes as a savings, whereas we're more targeting, well, we'll divert the funds towards, a scholarship or arts, some art piece.
hmm Nice. I think that ties into this idea that you've brought up a couple times, Corey, about cultural monetary worth and sort of establishing a monetary worth for culture, which I think on its face can be a difficult or a hard thing to hear. But in this instance, it is very important. And I know it seems that the sort of sentiment is changing a bit, that people are, teams are starting to understand that, for instance, if you're going to meet with elders, there's an expectation that there will be a stipend that you'll pay, these knowledge keepers for their time and for that knowledge. Or Eric, you spoke about, having engaging artists. I know a lot of offices will often, formally kind of hire an artist to be part of the consultation team, which is, I think they're great steps. And yeah, having that early engagement is really important to make sure that there's time to have that discussion and bring, maybe a client team along to understand why that's really valuable. And then also time to establish budget and fee for that work to happen, because it is very important. Um, when it comes to things like stipends, and just again recognizing that no two communities are the same, how do you go about sort of establishing, because it's been our experience that it's a delicate conversation to have. How much do we, are you expecting? How do you how do you breach that conversation?
I have not been in this situation yet. But I would start with most. I would imagine, and how I would see it, is most won't be looking for it. I mean, how I would approach it is looking for a community, hosting a community forum and engage a majority of the community that way. And people are going to be interested in this project, and this is how you're going to attract them into the big house or a gym or whatever, wherever it's going to be. And there's not going to be really a cost. Get some catering and we'll be pretty damn happy. We want to be involved in our communities. Um, but in the cases where it's relevant, I think that's just gonna case by case basis. You'll figure it out and somehow they'll name their price or vice versa.
Mm.
It'll become relevant in the budget. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, capacity funding. Eric mentioned capacity before. Every Indigenous community, not every, a lot of Indigenous communities will have their own capacity funding agreements kind of in place internally. We saw that through Squamish Nation. But this is again falling back on the cultural monetary worth system. And not only are we trying to establish a new market value as an independent business, but so are the communities, so are the artists. I did point out Robert Davidson as pushing this push, breaking through the ceiling of some of the totem poles that he's creating. Well, that's a new market value. So I look to him as a moment of inspiration for us to properly inform those that we're working with, whether it be local government, whether it be our clients, whether it be our partners on the project, our subs, of how to work through this process in the most appropriate way. And it comes back to budget, 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 understanding what that is.
Nice. Oh, excellent. Um, oh, this is a good one. Where do you hope to see the architectural industry go in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of Indigenous involvement? What are we not talking about now that we should be?
I think Cory should start with this and almost answer like what has changed in the last 5 to 10 years? What do you see as different in procurement? I mean, Vancouver became the city of reconciliation about 10 years ago, or a little more than that. Um, so we're in a time and generation of this like inflection point of how the economy of the indigenous related industry is vastly changing and very rapidly.
Yeah, Eric, you're right. The city of Vancouver's commitments to truth and reconciliation is starting to show some traction. Sanok, prime example of a project that's being managed by Squamish Nation, but has propositioned industry leaders to partner on. So, I see a more prominent presence with respect to our cultural visibility in our own territory. That from an artistic perspective, from a designer perspective, from an architect's perspective, is a great value system that I think we still have to explore what that looks like. I want to see more here. I don't want it to be just Sanok. I want a lot of independent landowners here in the city recognize the purpose of the land acknowledgement. We we exercise that land acknowledgement, but it's just words. It's just air. Um, we want to see more in procurement part initiatives, partnerships, raising awareness around um, who Musqueam, Squamish, and tsleil are. Who are your neighbors? What makes them Musqueam, Squamish, and tsleil? And I say them. I am Squamish. So this again like is a very in-depth conversation that we're having on all of our projects now. And Eric, you're right. It's again, I want to say it's super exciting to be doing the work that we are doing, modern formline design, with the clients that we're on the projects that we're working on, and the people that we're working with. We're very fortunate to be working with some of the leading design teams here in the city, and this is a $1 billion industry, billion here in Vancouver.
Mhm.
So we want to be a part of that process.
Okay.
Ryan, I'll add to your, or I like this question a lot because it's uh, this is what I'm passionate about, and one of the aspects of my business that I'm passionate about. Um, for my business, only 3 out of 7 infield members are Indigenous. And I think I'm lucky in the point that that's part of my circle, and one of them is my twin. And I include myself. So it's kind of cheap. But the what I'd like to see is that Indigenous involvement isn't necessarily approached in a tokenist way, but when you have them, build them up into professionals that we'll see in senior roles. Because this is when we're going to start seeing like the amount of Indigenous architects is really small. It's not representative of our population. I think that I would want to see, probably it's not going to happen in 5 to 10 years, but I think in 20 years we could start seeing some serious representation that actually resembles Canada's demographic. Um, Vancouver is very difficult for this. Our population of Indigenous is like 3%. So it's just it's difficult. I can't really blame too many people for having a hard time doing it. But put in some effort and it'll be recognized.
Well, it seems like an opportunity for that reciprocation as well to help kind
Mm.
of support, maybe give back a bit. But so we all know it is 1 o'clock, so that is an hour. There are obviously still quite a few questions. Thank you all for jumping in. If anyone needs to take off now, they're obviously free to do so. Just another final reminder to click on the link to report your own hours for the IABC. It's self-reporting for this. We won't be reporting for you. I think maybe if you guys are up for, we can take another 5, 10 and just answer maybe a couple more questions, and then we'll finish off. Perfect. So we have here, what organization would you start with if you wanted to engage First Nations involvement? A very broad question. So what do you think?
I picked Cory.
Yeah.
I vote for Cory. Reach out to him.
It's Eric. You mentioned it's a small market. We in Vancouver, well, in Vancouver here, we have a small number of Indigenous professionals providing a broad range of services to the industry. As you trickle down the process of a project and its deliverable system, there's a lot of ways that you can plug and play. And you know, I I would, humbly say I am, one of the leaders here in the city from Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh that are, engaging with the industry and outlining, some good strategies. But this is very much a shared responsibility, and I think there's a opportunity for maybe Modern Formline Design to collaborate with you on your projects. We would love to. But this is about building out teams. Eric and I can work with you guys. We would love to. Brett, Eric, and I can work with you. I think having you met with us, that is my proposition. Reach out to any one of us. We would happily engage with you on what that looks like. Um, and yeah, just looking forward to getting a bunch of emails after this. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Obviously, we use the term First Nations, Indigenous, these things, which is really an umbrella term for, a lot of, a massive variety of communities. So there is really no one place to kind of enter into this world. But yeah, people with experience in that background, so people such as yourselves are a great place to start to kind of find out where to start, I guess. Um,
Yeah,
so
I had a particularly, I should say, even as an Indigenous person here, I had a very particularly hard time engaging Squamish actually, and I haven't been successful. So not, you'll knock on some doors and you'll get turned away for sure. They have a large member base and they don't need Sioux projects there necessarily. Maybe one day, but we've had success with Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and other nations that that capacity isn't there. So I just shoot an email off, for people that are more established that have stopped doing those cold calls or cold emails. I would just start trying to do a bit of that, and people will connect you for sure.
for sure. We have here. Okay. What's the best way for the architecture profession to incorporate Indigenous values on a day-to-day basis? So, what can offices be doing right now to kind of start down that road?
We are, Shanti and I have found opportunities to work with a broad range of professionals in our field, whether it be architects, landscape architects, general contractors. Our relationships with them is outlining a little bit of a long-term strategy. Um, we are working on a project by project basis, but I think maybe even opening the door for workshop sessions. So, we have a large number of Indigenous people here in Vancouver that are artisans. And, I would I could comfortably say that our industry in architecture uh, is heavily dependent on our relationship with the First Nations arts community. It bridges the gap between industry and the First Nations community. So I think if you're going to find any commitments internally for your organizations to be better informed, educated about this subject matter, it would be finding potential artists to come in and work with you either on a specific project or a workshop, but maintain those relationships. Maintain them. It's crucial.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Fostering and maintaining relationships is really an excellent window into that world. And along with building those artistic relationships, another area that we're something that I'm kind of passionate about trying to explore a little bit more is education and opportunities to engage with any members of First Nations communities that are interested in Eric, like your brother, having supporting people that are interested in getting into the field. It's a fairly underrepresented profession, I would say. So any opportunity to kind of bring, youth or older people that are interested in architecture along, is a great way to kind of establish some relationships and, you know, reduce the amount of cold calls that you're making, I guess. You'll be known to that community because you're helping kind of support that community.
Totally. I think add to that is in construction and incorporating Indigenous values into the construction aspect and bringing you know trying to present anyways sustainable products and maybe energy efficient homes or whatever we're looking at building um, is appreciated. I think though budget is very important, if we can at all integrate things that will have an environmental impact, I think we look and stare a little less at if dollars are going to connect or like our return on investment or whatever. It's like if we can do something that's going to be good for the next 7 generations, that's what we'd like to do.
Awesome. That's great.
I,
Um,
I think I know Dan here, so I do want to get to his question.
okay, well, it's seven
Yeah.
after, so maybe we'll make Dan's the last question, and then we'll that'll be that for today.
Yeah.
Oh, how
If it's
does
the Dan I know, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of Dan Greens out there, but I used to work with the Dan. My first job in the Indigenous field, I was finishing my third year of carpentry, fourth year, and I went up to Williams Lake and worked with a First Nation up there, and I got fired after 3 months because I nagged to them about the quality of work that they were willing to put forward, and I just, tight budgets, and they were trying to spread money too thin. Anyways, hopefully he's stuck around for us answering this question. But
perfect?
oh,
Yeah. So how does the
introducing Indigenous form, I think, is kind of. Oh, sorry, Brett. Go ahead and
Oh, no, 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 go ahead. I'm
yeah.
sorry. Go. Um,
Hopefully you guys can read that in the chat.
Yeah. So how
Yeah.
does the design of structures proposed for development affect the cost of the project? My experience is remote areas will increase cost of projects. Yeah, I think this is really the question here. Is there a centralized Indigenous inventory slash distribution system like Amazon in place to ensure resources are available for construction projects to maintain the schedule and achieve economies of scale? Or is this something that maybe is for future consideration? And do you either of you have any experience with a sort of indigenous Amazon? I can't say that I have.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna ignore that point. I don't think there's nothing there. I mean, as far as like Indigenous ownership, go to CCIB, but and try to find some suppliers there. But I think one of these aspects is like, especially when it comes to remote projects, budgets are so thin already because of the location factor on in construction. Like how do you start incorporating Indigenous form into something that already has a thin budget? I think it's one of those things that the industry hasn't created a scale to incorporate Indigenous part. We get these really colonial designs and boxy and something just not ugly, but just not what traditionally was there and what we want to see in our communities. So it's like this problem of our gas and diesel vehicles and going over to electric. We don't have the technology to be able to do it in a cost-effective manner yet, or we haven't built businesses that are going to do it in a cost-effective manner yet. And that's what we can change, and I think those businesses will do very well. Um, there is designs though that are really easy that can work with like traditional like stick frame or conventional stick frame. I would say like the longhouse style builds can really be super easy, and I don't know why they're not done more. Um, and I don't know, you know what? Get a 3D concrete printer and build a pit house. I don't know. Like we can do it if we really are ready to put the investment into these things. And really, people haven't been putting the investment there and trying to valorize Indigenous architecture more. So
I think the Indigenous value system um, that we're currently trying to explore through engagement um, isn't very far off from like sustainability, right? So, we're trying to bring, I'm going to call English a foreign language to outline an identity of of a culture. So how are we coming up with appropriate terms of reference with this foreign language to reflect the cultural values of an Indigenous community? So now you have an Indigenous community that's trying to better understand, what role that they play. So this is maybe not necessarily answering this, but it's challenging a system. To Eric's point, we have a colonial system that's in place um, through policies, bylaws, um, budget, design, technology. But as far as an Indigenous community prior to contact, we had a system in place. So how do we merge indigeneity prior to contact in this value system with a foreign language with an industry that has reshaped our traditional territory? It's a strong proposition, but projects can outline a lot of overlap, a lot of potential initiatives that haven't quite been explored yet. So, I think collaborative efforts on a project can really outline how effective this can be. So, I think there's tons of opportunity out there. I'm really curious what that looks like over the next few years. We don't intend on slowing down anytime soon. So really excited to meet some of you in the future.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're at quarter after, so probably good to stop there. A reminder again to reach out to Cory or to Eric directly through their contact information. Again, as a starting point into this discussion. Also, join us for our next presentation. It'll be on January 27th with Uri Utov of Kolesnikov Design talking about mass timber. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you soon.